G'day everyone, welcome to Talking Landscape Photography. It's nice to be back with you. It's been a little bit of time. I'm sorry I was away last episode, but I've just got back from a lovely trip to South Australia, which is where my family's from, and I grew up there. So it was nice to get away and do some shooting. And tonight, of course, we've got Paul Hoelen joining us. Paul, welcome.
Yeah, thanks, brother. I haven't been as busy as Lukey, and I haven't been racing around, but I've been editing some photos like this, which has been pretty nice. I'm just working on some of them tonight, and I'm actually organising a workshop to take people here in a couple of weeks. It was originally going to be Lukey and I together, but he's so in demand. He's got a million other jobs all around the country. I got the one left for the reins, so we've got a spot or two free if someone's interested in coming. 27th to 30th. It's a really good time for Astro. We set it up on the new moon, and this is definitely one of the places we'll be heading up. So if you're interested, just look me up.
Yeah, it's like I have to actually wax lyrical about that a little bit, because last year we ran a workshop on Bruny Island at the same time, and I had two clients at that time, and they happened to be there when we had the biggest aurora for about 5 or 6 years.
Oh yeah.
And
Oh, no,
it was magnificent. And we were at Cape Bruny Lighthouse, which is arguably one of the, well, we'll talk with Ollie about maybe a better location, but it's probably the best, most accessible location in Tasmania, arguably in the Southern Hemisphere. So it was very fortunate to happen, but around September, October is normally a very good aurora period, because it's around the equinox and there's generally more heightened auroral activity around that sort of time. So if you're into auroras, it's a bloody nice time to be down there. But also having Paul, who knows Bruny like the back of his hand, is also a really great thing to have. So if you do want to join Paul on that, then just send him a message, and I'm sure that he will take you through it all.
Yeah, I remember that night so well. Lukey was down at the lighthouse, and I was actually right here, kind of at the same time. And I couldn't speak to him or talk to him because there's no reception down there, but I knew he's just absolutely frothing. I mean, I was still shooting up at 4 in the morning out here. It didn't stop all night. It was just active like nothing I've ever seen. And I was just down here by myself the entire night, just shaking my head, just going, what's going on?
Yeah, it was very hard to go to sleep that night.
Right behind there, it's just
I know.
The next place is Antarctica. So there's nothing between there and Antarctica. It's just pure south. And the lighthouse is the same. So but again, I got to really thank Lukey for this. I wasn't a big Astro guy sort of 3-4 years ago. I did a little bit here and there, and spending time with a master like him and guys like Benny Aldridge and Nick and Andrew Phipps have all kind of got me on the froth mode, and I've slowly got the kind of gear and lenses to really maximize opportunities.
As long as it's not a morning shoot, you're right, isn't it, Paul? Like, you're a night owl as it is, so you're already going to be up. But if it's in the morning,
it's natural time.
Yeah, that's
right. Is that right?
Shoots, well,
no sunrises before.
Yeah. Oh no, I do it when I need to. I'm probably up at sunrise tomorrow. There's a 12-foot swell heading the east coast right now, and it's turning offshore at about 5 in the morning. So I'm going to race out there and be ready for this 4.5-hour window with the winds offshore, and try and get some of the biggest waves I've had in a long time. So that's enough to get me out of bed.
It's probably worth mentioning as well that there's some places in Tassie, as we're just chatting now, that are doing it pretty tough with a huge amount of rain coming through. And I guess that's why I chose my background for tonight. Like a little placid stream like this would turn into something like a raging torrent in these sort of rainfalls. I think some places were talking about getting up to 300 millimeters, which is massively significant in such a short period of time. So yeah, hopefully they do all right. And we're
a bit worried about how that's going to play out. I mean, I feel like we've been super lucky, Tasmania, relative to the rest of Australia, in terms of fire and flood in the last few years. We had our share of fire pretty seriously. 2 different summers in the last 6 years were pretty gnarly, but at the same time, for the last few years, we've had it pretty easy. So I feel like we're kind of paying our dues a little bit in terms of all of us are going to be taking our turns in different places of the world with what we're facing, and we've just got to do it together, I guess.
That's it. And well, we probably should welcome our guest tonight as well, Ollie Whone. Welcome to Talking Landscape Photography. And what have you been up to lately?
Hi. Thanks for having me. Been watching this show for a while and pretty chuffed for you guys to ask me if I want to come on. So this is great.
Oh, we've,
Yeah,
we've
so
been
I
talking
got,
about it for a while, mate. I brought it up about half a year ago. I want
Yeah,
to get
yeah,
Ollie on the show.
yeah, right.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's great to hear. I got back on Saturday from Europe, where I hadn't been. I'm German originally, and I moved to Australia about 12 years ago. And I hadn't been back to Germany in 8 years,
Oh,
and
wow.
this was now my first trip back. And since my last trip, I've gotten into photography. So that meant as part of this trip, we organized to head into the Dolomites for about a week, which was a pretty significant experience.
Wow.
Um, and I'm still going through photos, and it's been a week since we've been back, and I'm looking at hundreds of pictures, and I'm getting a bit crushed by the idea of having to edit my way through that, which I think is a fairly normal experience. But there's a couple in there, and I've actually included a few of the shots that
Oh, brilliant.
I'm going to be editing. I've not
I was,
really done
I was
much with them
hoping you
yet,
would
but
say
they're
that.
great to have a look at anyway.
Oh, yeah, for
Pardon?
sure.
Mm.
Sometimes that's just what you have to do
Um,
you can see what it's going to look like in the end, if once you apply some work to it. So no, that's fantastic. Can't
that's
wait to
right.
see those. And then, so it
Yeah,
must be. Did you notice much change in Germany since the last time you were back there?
bit hard to tell because
Yeah,
I feel I've been here for so long that I've just adapted to the culture here.
yeah,
So I think I got back and I noticed how the culture wasn't necessarily sitting too well with me anymore. But I don't think it's changed. I think things
yeah,
have stayed the same. That's the thing about home. It's nice too to know that you can go back and it's this place that's been there and stayed there.
yeah. And
Um,
like you're not
so I
missing
think
out on
I think
much in
in
a way.
general,
Yeah. No, that's
no,
good.
no, it was great to see everyone. It was great to see my family. It was great to come back to Tassie, that's for
Yeah.
sure.
So Ollie, just go back a step because
Yeah.
the viewers,
Mm.
we haven't even mentioned that you even live in Tasmania. So
Oh
if
yeah,
you just
yeah,
give us a
yeah.
quick big picture in terms of
Ah,
who you are, where you come from, and where you live, and what you get up to just to set the ground and start the ball rolling.
um, so I'm German, and then in my late 20s moved to Australia. Was just going to go to uni for a year. Decided I like it. I don't want to leave. Stayed in Sydney for a number of years. Met Jen, who's my wife now. Met her there. She'd moved down from the Central Coast in New South Wales, and we, in the years that we lived together in Glebe in Sydney, we kept coming to Tassie, and kept coming back, and eventually didn't like coming back to our place in Glebe. So we said, it's great being in Hobart. Why don't we see if we can make a life down there? And then it was around 5 years ago that we packed our bags and came here. Yeah, and the last 5 years, we're always amazed looking back at this now. Living in Hobart, the 5 years that we've lived here feel like it should have been way longer because we've experienced so much since we've gotten here. Yeah, it's
Mm.
incredible. There's been a lot of change. There's been a lot of things that we never used to do before. We go hiking and overnight hiking a lot together now, and I've gotten into photography. Jen's gotten into photography as well, and it's you know, just completely transformed the way we live our lives. And um, photography for me still is first and foremost something I do for myself. I do have my part-time job, so I can pay my bills because at the moment photography wouldn't be doing that.
It's hard
Um,
to make it work.
but um, with pure landscape photography, sure is, yeah. But that's the thing. Like it's turned into a passion that when I'm not thinking about work, I'm thinking about where can I head next and what could I shoot next, and I look at pictures and I try and get inspired. And yeah, it's an access to creativity that I didn't really have until I got into photography overall. And the way that I fell down, fell into this well was 2016. I got a drone, and it was, the idea was, it flies and that's amazing. But I was thinking I'll make it I was going to look into developing videography skills. So I was watching travel videos and so on. These serious little bits of creativity where you've got insane cuts and transitions and so on. I was just sitting there, flabbergasted by how amazing some of these are. I thought that's what I want to do as well. And so started with looking at videography. I had a drone for a while. Didn't know anything about using a camera. Eventually then 2018, got my first full frame camera, which was the A7 III, because in the lead up to that, the Sony A7 III, because in the lead up to that, I was starting to see what you can do with astrophotography and how Milky Way pictures can come out. And that blew my mind. Like it's, I'm looking at the shot behind you, Paul, right now. And in early 2017, that was just, there was no concept in my mind about being able to capture this with, essentially a consumer piece of equipment. And then as I was ready to buy myself my first camera, Sony announced the A7 III, which is just, at the time, an unbelievably effective low light and nighttime camera.
Yeah.
So picked that up, and it was a matter of thinking, right, during the day, I'm going to be focusing on developing videography skills, and at night, I'm going to go and shoot astrophotography. And turns out if you don't really know much about using a camera, if you're learning how the craft works, I feel like diving straight into video is jumping the ship a little. It really was a matter of learn how to take photos, and then take that a step further if you feel like it. So 2018, then late 2018, have my first camera. 2019 is the whole year is really just spent going out shooting nonstop, learning the rings and learning, thinking about compositions, thinking about settings, the sort of things that, you kind of what you want to wrap your head around in the beginning. I think back then I wasn't really thinking about light much. I wasn't really thinking about, working with conditions. I'd be going out in the middle of the day, sort of waiting for, golden hour periods and so on. But it was still fun, got a heap out of it because it's just an activity that gets you outside. And I think being outside is just something that's always made me feel good. I'm pretty sure you guys can appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. From there, then, that's 2019, 2020, then is when I started being a little more considered with what I do and started setting different goals for myself. And then obviously COVID came around and we had lockdowns, and lockdown I used to develop Photoshop photo editing skills. So there's a photographer that I've always enjoyed. I don't know if you're aware, but Mads Peter Iversen. He's
Yes.
Danish landscape photographer. So he had a Photoshop landscape photography editing course that, at the time I was thinking, Jesus, it's a couple $100 for this. It's probably worth it, but I'm going to be sitting at home now for the next couple of weeks. I'll use that time this way, and that really changed the way that capturing is one thing, but post-processing is obviously a big part of the craft, and that sort of made me look at the actual entire environment of photography a bit differently, where I just set different standards for myself, I think. It's funny, if you scroll down my Instagram feed, there's a certain point where I feel, obviously it's through my eyes, but I can see this is where that switch sort of happened, where careful with how I work with contrast and so on. But anyway, so that was then 2020, I feel, where I started really moving into the landscape photography area and thinking that videography is fun. It's one thing, but it's not really where I'm going to want to focus my energy on. And so then we all know how 2020 went, and nobody was going anywhere, and none of us were leaving Tasmania supposedly. And that's when I then picked up a hiking tent and all the equipment to be able to go and do hikes here for the purpose of being in a nice spot when the light's right. And so that's now been about a year and a half, 2-ish years of me being able to do that. And I don't think I've ever filled my personal time, in such a meaningful, valuable way. It's pursuing small adventures and really nice moments. You know, going through my photos today, and you know, sort of thinking about how to, preparing for our chat here tonight. I was just looking at some of these shots, thinking, 5 years ago, I would have never thought that I'll go and sit, at Mount Sprent, for example, in the middle of the night by myself, with not a soul around anywhere, and just shoot stars and enjoy that. Yeah, it's a pretty spectacular type of solitude that I didn't ever expect to be able to enjoy. So it's a pretty huge gift that this passion for photography has given me.
It's very true, and there's not everyone though would take it maybe to the level that you have in terms of doing the overnight trips and climbing mountains and camping on the top of the mountain to get the shots. And it certainly sounds like you've had a moment or something that's happened that's really connected you with that experience that has sort of encouraged you to keep going. Can you really sort of think of a time that's sort of inspired you to actually seek more of that out?
I think, admittedly, the first time I thought about getting myself a lightweight tent was when I think it was Cape Hoy down here on the Tasman Peninsula, and I'd gone out for sunset. So I'd stayed at Fortescue Bay, and then I hiked out for whatever it is, 2 hours or so, to the Cape to shoot the sunset, then wait for the Milky Way, shot that, and then I walked back out to the car and slept in the rooftop tent there. But then I got up again 2.5 hours later, 3 hours later, and walked back out again. And as I was heading back out, I was thinking, this is stupid, this is stupid. Why, I need to get myself a setup that allows me to comfortably just stay out there.
That is a pretty tricky spot though to camp out though, isn't it? There's not many people.
you would be doing it there,
yeah.
But I was thinking, this is a roundabout way of being at the right place at the right time, and I think that gave me the idea that to be at the right place at the right time, if you can sleep there, you can, and from there it didn't really take much convincing. It's a matter of say something in the southwest that's not hugely challenging. It's not talking Western Arthurs, for example, but just a quick overnighter when you have time for Mount Wedge or Mount Sprent, like I was just saying, is it's there and it's doable. It's not necessarily dangerous. It's not you don't want to step on a snake, and you don't want to go out when the conditions are bad, and you don't want to fall over and break a leg. But even then, I've got a beacon and all these things that prepare you for those kind of scenarios. And I just feel like it's there and you can do it. So it'd be silly not to take advantage of it. I feel more, I don't know, I'm more comfortable doing that than walking through Sydney's King's Cross on a Saturday night home from work. That feels dodgy.
Very, very true. Very, very true. And there's certainly something that's pretty powerful about spending the night out in the wilderness like that on your own, and especially if you're out under the stars on top of that as well, and just having that incredible experience to yourself. Do you really seek out those moments of solitude?
I didn't think that would be quite so much my thing a number of years ago, but now I just realized it just feels good. If I'm indoor, if I'm at home for too long without getting out, I get stir crazy and just a bit just uncomfortable, really. That's I think that's the best way of putting it. And then when I head out and I'm gone from like a Friday to a Sunday or whatever, I come back, and Jen will say, even if I didn't get the conditions I was after or something, if I just managed to get out and experience something like that, I come home and I'm feeling great. It's a surprise to me as well that is something that I get a lot out of. But it's quite therapeutic, I think. Yeah,
that's brilliant. And you've also mentioned that you're able to share that with Jen as well, and like it may be something that you guys wouldn't have typically done together as well.
Yeah, that's right. So we've we've had a rooftop tent on our car for ages, and we've used that a lot, which is one thing. So camping is something we've been doing for a while, but then overnight hikes was new, right? And it's always a matter of where we're going to go. Is it going to be really hard? Because in that case, Jen's going to say, "No, you're on your own." Yeah. So I want to take her out to Cape Pillar in the coming weeks.
Beautiful.
Which is honestly, it's a very easy walk. It's 4 hours, if you take your time, it's 4 hours, and that's right. And I feel like that's going to be around the limit of how far she's willing to play along with it. But even so, there's plenty you can do that's exactly that sort of experience, and yeah, and it's nice doing that together as well. I've got a shot I'm going to show you later where the first proper aurora I ever got to see here was at South Cape Bay, and the very southern tip of Tasmania. And I was, that was the first time Jen came out with me on an overnight hike.
Oh, amazing.
And it was a matter of her saying, "All right, I'm going to go and hit the hay now, but you can, if you're going to, you can keep the lookout and see if anything kicks off." And eventually it did, and it was the first time you stepped out and you could just see aurora with the naked eye, and we'd never experienced that before. And it's a pretty amazing thing to be able to share an experience like that as well.
Yeah, brilliant. And it's all because of you picked up a camera and where it's taken you.
Essentially.
So it's pretty special.
Mm.
Well, maybe we'll get you to share your screen and check out some images and go through a bit of a visual journey now through some of your work.
Yeah, so I've not just included some of my favorite shots. I think I've included a bunch of pictures that I connect with and that sort of explain why and how I work my way into photography. But I'll show you. I'll just manage the screen sharing. Here we go. Just starting with this, by no means a special shot. It's a nice shot. We lived right there on the in Hobart's eastern shore, and the reason why I'm sharing this is because that was the first time that I took a photo thinking like that gave me something. That made me looked at the back of the camera and thought, there's something here, something pleasing to look at, and back then I thought, oh, I'd print that up on the wall. It's now a couple of years later, and I probably would take that print down. But nonetheless, like I just got a connection to this picture that is a lovely memory, and that's the first time we're here in 2018, I think, late 2018. And then similarly with astrophotography, this is a really early shot where you can just see there's some banding in the sky that's from stacking incorrectly. There's a couple of things wrong with the picture, but still that was me realizing that I can do things with a camera I didn't realize I could achieve, which is a great feeling, Similarly here, that's down at Tinderbox. Give it a second to load. That's down from the jetty at Tinderbox.
Yep.
I was lucky. I got there early, and it was aurora forecast. And sorry, my drive is trying desperately.
No, we can actually see it pretty well on the screen share. So it's actually not too bad.
File.
Yeah.
How many images did you put this together?
Oh, I can't remember, to be honest with you. Probably good 10.
Yeah.
There's a fair bit of overlap on each image here to because it just ended up helping with noise reduction. But there we go. So I got lucky that night. Let me have a look at when I shot this, because I think it would have been one of the aurora periods fairly early on, October 2019. Got early to the jetty at Tinderbox and set up there, and actually made a mate there that night who is a pretty great photography mate of mine now, Daniel Clark, who I would imagine, awesome. So I was set up out there. A couple of other people arrived, and he was the one who actually walked down and said, "Hey, do you mind if I set up next to you for a little bit?"
Yeah, cool.
Because it was the front row there, and yeah, I had a nice chat with him, and now him and his partner have intermittently moved to Victoria, but they can't stay away from Tassie, and they're going to be back in December, which is really exciting.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
I mean, that's another great thing that's happened to photography through photography is I've met so many people in Hobart that I'm not sure I would have gotten to know otherwise, and a whole bunch of people that are fairly good friends of mine now as well. And it was just a matter of starting to post on Instagram,
Yeah.
in
There's a
2020 or
great little
whatever.
community down here. Absolutely.
Yeah, I was really surprised by Instagram actually doing what they always say it does, like actually connecting communities rather than destroying the world, you know.
Yeah.
And yeah, it actually happened here, yeah, anyway, so that's night I met there. Um, and then yeah, still early on, these are all the sort of shots that made me think there's something here, there's something I can actually pursue with that gives me satisfaction. So obviously this is Cradle Mountain and the Enchanted Forest shot that's been, these shots have been done lots of times, nonetheless, so I've included this here. No, no, by no means a photo I would do much with, but it was the first time I headed out on an overnighter when I had my my kit together, and I was so chuffed with myself to be able to go and do these things now. And about, I think, an hour and a half after this photo, I was going to go back to camp, and I thought, oh, you know what? There might be another shot there. And I walked too close to the water's edge and got washed over
Oh no.
and fell
Oh,
in. And then this was the last picture my camera ever took
Oh no.
because it was cactus. Yeah,
Oh dear.
yeah. It was a pretty on-brand effort for me, sitting there being just really happy with everything, and then just doing something silly, and it all goes, it's up.
oh, no.
Um, yeah. Anyway,
I'm sure that a
and
lot of
this,
people have those sort of stories, but you just will never hear them because that'll there's no benefit in them airing their dirty laundry like that. So yeah.
that's it was a learning experience. I think at this point I know because if you go and shoot seascapes, if you're suddenly in knee or hip deep water, just stay steady. Don't try and move and get out of the way and try and get out of dodge, and don't freak out, but rather just stay where you are. Because I mean, what happened is I freaked out. Like I looked down and suddenly I'm standing in water. I felt like that shouldn't be the case, so I started to walk, and I stepped on a rock and just slipped on a rock that I couldn't see under a meter of water.
Mm,
But it's a learning experience, and I don't mind sharing that.
yeah, no, well,
Um,
it's
yeah.
part and parcel of doing landscapes, isn't it? That you are putting yourself
Mm,
out there in the elements, and
mm,
often if you want those really dynamic seascape images, you do have to get amongst it, and I
mm.
he had quotes before, like if you're not getting wet, you're not close enough, and stuff like that. So
Oh yeah,
um,
yeah. I've
yeah,
heard
so
that.
it's
Yeah.
a big part of it. But yeah, what's the other saying? You got to break eggs to make omelets. Is another one. So
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a good
yeah,
one.
yeah. And luckily, Jen, Jen, my partner, my wife, was so all over it that she said, "It's all right. I've included your camera in our home and contents," and actually managed to get it replaced.
Oh,
oh,
filth.
fantastic.
Yeah. Oh, I was hugely lucky. Yeah. Um, but anyway, so this here is then. So now we're in late 2020. Having started in 2018, and in 2020 was when I started keeping an eye out for potential photos and for potential subjects and compositions, and thinking about how they can work um, in the right conditions. Um, and that was one of these things where I just driven down the Midlands Highway. I think this is toward not Midlands Highway, but towards Hamilton, out
Oh
in the
yeah, yeah.
Midlands, and saw this by no means spectacular, but just nicely, this pretty little isolated tree standing there, and thought for a sunset with the right clouds, this could work out really nicely. And it was great to drive out there, set up, put the telelens on, and just wait for this to work out.
Mm.
Um, Took a heap of shots of that at the time. Actually saw later that because it was so far away I couldn't see with the naked eye, but there was a wedge-tailed eagle sitting in the tree for a whole
Yeah,
bunch of
there are a
those
few out
shots.
that
It's
way,
pretty
aren't they?
cool.
Yeah.
Mm, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Ollie, I
So
noticed
this
a lot of your images are high-end telephoto. What sort of length are you talking about for a lot of what you do?
that's 100 to 400.
Yeah.
So
Oh, yeah.
I was thinking about whether I should, whether I should go with a 70 to 200 or 100 to 4. I thought the 100 to 400 was, seeing as, this is not my main source of income. There's the only available Sony 100 to 400 was a $3,700 lens, which was very hard for me to justify. And then right as I was thinking about, what telelens could I get, Sigma put out a perfectly you know, decent piece of glass. That's 100 to 400 at about a third of the price. I was like, well, there you go. And that lens comes everywhere. I mean, I lugged that up Frenchman's Cap and
Oh my
taken it to
God.
the wall. I was like, I just, I know that if I don't bring that tele lens, I'm going to regret it. Because what happens very often is if I'm in a nice place and the light gets good and I don't have an immediate foreground or any composition set up, like you've got that reach on you. You'll find something when the light's right. That's usually what will happen. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes I
Yeah.
guess the
So
the
I
vision
mean,
you had for that big grand scene doesn't play out or what have you, and so you sort of
mm,
you can pull out that longer lens and pick off little details that
mm,
that can still tell a story without having to go wide, I suppose.
that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, here's that next example is that same year, December, went to the walls of Jerusalem and sat on Solomon's throne with a mate, having just a really nice time, enjoying the sunset and just watching that sort of golden light kicking off. Uh, so you're looking into the overland area here. Not able to tell you what the peaks are called, but it's just again, there's memories attached to these shots that mean I wouldn't do much with it today, but I still know what was going on and how it felt being there in the moment.
Mm.
Um, and then this is an example of doing a solo hike and sitting on Mount Wedge in the Southwest National Park
Okay.
and getting blue hour shots. I think this would be shooting across the Western Arthurs, I believe.
Yeah, I
Um,
think it's out in that direction. Yeah, definitely.
mm, yeah, so again, you can see, Paul, I like using the telelens there. Um, let's see, like this would be at 400, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
And do
it
you
and
find
certainly
you
comes
go,
through as
Paul?
part of your style and the way you see. I think like
pardon
I've
me.
actually only just got 100 to 400 literally a couple of months ago, first time ever in my life.
Mm,
And I've been scrolling through your feed, getting a lot of inspiration about the kind of images that I literally have not taken in my life because I just haven't had that focal length ever.
mhm.
And it's getting me a little bit excited about exploring places that I've already been and done in a way that I haven't before visually.
Yeah. I do think it's a really interesting focal length to use because find you do find composition shots and like Luke saying like little stories that um are very easy to miss. And you can, like you're saying, go back to a place that you've shot many times and get something completely new out of it. Um, yeah, that's exciting to hear. So, have you taken it out at all yet, or?
Yeah. I actually bought it
Mm.
for the last birding workshop that I did with Lukey, and because we were
Oh,
doing a lot of wildlife stuff and a lot of incredible boat sort of based wildlife things, and with cliffs and
mm,
seal colonies and seabirds and
yeah, right.
it was sort of like the kind of mountain ranges across the channel that normally I wouldn't be able to access at all became part of my compositions for the first time in a lot of
Mm,
ways because they're just not really a powerful part of an image with a wide angle lens and
mm,
because of physical distance and all of a sudden I had a field day and I got a really light one.
hmm.
It's and I literally had it in my pocket while I was shooting. It fit
Christ, 100 to
inside my
400.
jacket pocket, and I just
Right.
swapped lenses from my pocket. It was that small, and I
That's
was just like,
wild.
"Oh my God,
Mm,
this is great! I'll
Yeah,
be
yeah,
that's
right.
taking this." I actually take this one up a mountain, whereas I probably wouldn't with one of the more traditional, bigger 100-400s. So
Well, I think this one is 1.2 or 1.3 kilos, which I think in
Wow.
the grand scheme of things for that focal range isn't crazy.
no.
Yeah.
But
And I was,
not
all right.
go on, sorry.
I was interested as well, like if you've got any tips, I suppose, for the viewers in terms of when you're shooting with those focal lengths, obviously, because you're looking at such a tiny little part of the overall scene, any movement is magnified, I suppose, at that focal length. If you've got any tips for anyone about making sure if you're going to shoot that long, especially outdoors, just to avoid any sort of any out of focus or vibrations or soft
Yeah,
images.
that was a pretty significant learning curve, I think. Because the first while, we're just looking at, this is all part of the first few months of me owning that lens. And there were a lot of missed shots that at the time I couldn't see. Just there was the tiniest bit of shake introduced because, like you're saying, at that focal length, the slightest bit of wind, or the shutter opening and closing, the curtain opening and closing can introduce, blurry areas or just blur the whole shot, and you won't see it until you're at home, and you'll be very frustrated when you see it there. So the way that I've started mitigating that is, I very rarely have the lens hood on that lens anyway, which I think I should try at times more because it does help control the light falling into the barrel. But you take the lens hood off for sure if there was any wind blowing, and then you just want to make sure that you have your shutter speed relatively fast. So you're not going to go down to, if I'm shooting it over 200 to 300 mils, I'm unlikely to go under 1/10 of a second. Unless I wasn't paying attention, and I do it anyway. But that's what I'd be focusing on, just ramping up ISO where I can.
And that's tripod based, obviously.
Oh yeah,
Do that handheld.
I think yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And then also once I've got the telelens on the tripod, I turn the lens stabilization off.
Yeah.
Because again, at relatively slow shutter speeds, the actual lens stabilization will try and compensate for something that isn't there. Again, leading to a blurry image, and then leading to me being incredibly frustrated at home.
Yeah, that's a tricky one too. That's easy to miss, the
I forget all the
IS
time.
drift or whatever you would refer to it as. Yeah, it's definitely something that can catch you out. I remember having a 24-105 Canon way back in the day, and was having terrible problems with my long exposures, trying to work out why they're always soft, and took a while to sort that one out. So
I was going to say it's a frustrating one to miss. I mean, it still happens that I miss it now when I'm trying out shots with, for example, the 24-105, and I'm just having a look around, and I'm taking some test shots, and I've got the stabilization on, and it goes on the tripod, and I forget to turn it off. There's got to be a little mental checklist, I think, for certain setups.
Yeah, I've found a way around that. In that, and I don't know if some cameras allow you to do it, but I've got custom settings for tripod versus handheld, and when I switch it over to the custom setting for tripod mode, it actually turns off the stabilization.
That's a great idea.
So that way, some lenses, if they have a switch, it will say no. The switch is on the lens, not on the menu. So too bad, so sad. But sometimes it's okay. So. But I guess it's a good thing to do anyway, because you don't really want to have the inbuilt image stabilization moving it all over a long exposure either. So it's just something to consider if you're doing custom settings and those sort of things for those at home. Yeah.
What's next? So this is what I mentioned earlier. First time Jen came out with me, and we went to South Cape Bay.
Wouldn't be too many Aurora shots like that.
Oh, that was a wild aurora. Yeah, it was beautiful. So as we saw, the I think this is what's referred to as the picket fence, isn't it?
It's probably more beams. I think with picket fence is a very distinctive, generally green lines going across like a bit like a tiger stripes. Yeah. But
Right.
yeah, but yeah,
But I
it's
mean, we're sitting there. We saw the beams and really just moving across the horizon, and it was just spectacular. It was a great experience, and that led then also to getting a little shot like that, which
so
is
nice.
just kind of it's a cute thing to have.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, and then
Uh,
I feel like this is an example of um, I do. I feel like often we're talking about, getting your setup right, and you got your tripod settings versus your handheld settings, and this is the Hoelen River in southern Tassie, and I was going to head down to Hart's Peak that day to just do a day out shooting, and on the way, I just saw there was nice fog still on the river, and I saw this boat, so I just pulled over to the side of the road, opened the window, once again with 100 to 400 mil lens, and just handheld got this one shot and drove on.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of my favorite photos of the last couple of years, because there's a lot to it. And actually, I put it on a Huon Valley, I think the Huonville community page, and found the guy who owns that boat.
oh
He was
wow.
really chuffed by the picture.
Yeah.
Super lovely bloke as
Nice.
well. That's just a nice little thing that ties it all together. And the reason why I included this here is because we it's nice to know that it doesn't have to be your mental checklist of getting everything right to walk away with something you really get enjoyment out of.
Mm. And
As
also
I say,
being opportunistic as well, I guess. And
mm,
it could have been very easy to go, no, I'm going to Hearts, I'm not going to,
mm,
this isn't the shot, but you sort of
that's
could
right.
notice
Yeah.
that there was something worth stopping and pulling over for. And not everyone
Mm.
would do that. I don't know if I would do that sometimes, but you've got
Oh,
to
I reckon I'm sure I've missed lots of shots because I didn't pull over. Yeah. Yeah, and then this is, we've seen this composition heaps of times, but it's a nice memory. It's walking into Dove Lake in the morning at Cradle Mountain, middle of winter, uh not a soul around, completely everything is covered in fog, and then at some point, it lifts right in time. And it was just a very peaceful time being there. And yeah,
Did you
it
go
was
up
nice.
there specifically for the sunrise, or that was sort of
Yeah.
you were in the area, or
No, so that was we had the in-laws visiting from New South
ah
Wales, and we were staying at Cradle Mountain with them.
yeah,
So I just one morning got up early and drove to what's the creek called? I'm just
Ronnie Creek,
like
yeah,
Ronnie
Ronnie
Creek.
Creek,
yeah.
thank you. And just walked that bit in. And being from Germany and having grown up in an area where you've got lots of cold, frosty, icy, snowy mornings, it's quite nice to get that here then as well. And
Mm.
we get our cold and snowy conditions in Hobart, but it's a different ball game up around Cradle, just the elevation overall. And yeah, I remember walking the road, down to Dove Lake and just thinking this feels very familiar. It's lovely. um so yeah, this is again, it's a nice memory.
And you
This is in
mentioned
the
also just
Midlands.
being at Cradle on your own, and it must be, it's hard to access now for sunrise, so
Yeah, it is.
that's annoying for photographers. But if you do put the effort in, then you can have
Mm,
a place like that all to yourself.
to
So
yourself,
it's
yeah.
a
Yeah.
double-edged sword there, I guess, if you look at it that way.
Yeah, it's true. And I think that was something we spoke for. I think, yeah, anyway, is we do have the opportunity to go and shoot amazing scenery in relative solitude. As we're saying, just got back from the Dolomites, and
Mm.
um I was worried that I was going to end up in a situation where it's just one person next to another lining up the same composition, which I think happens a fair bit there. It's still busy, but fortunately that didn't happen.
Oh, good.
Um, but overall, then we go to Cradle Mountain, and we realize, once the buses start coming, it's like, oh, this place packs up.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. This is again an opportunistic moment, driving through the Midlands, seeing that the full moon is just coming up, and thinking, oh Jesus, I need to pull up somewhere and find something really quickly. Got stupidly lucky with a tree that lined up, but again could have driven right past it. Uh, it's just these painterly sort of scene. There's a spot an hour north that I'd like to drive to. and just go up onto one of the hills and wait for sunset and just hang out, bring the telelens and see what I can pick out. Again, it's just something that feels good, something that is nice at the end of a day to spend a few hours out there in that kind of scenery. On the way back from actually this day, I saw in the rearview mirror these two trees that almost looked as if you've got, it almost looks like one tree is reaching for the other, with the moon above that. So that was just a nice little scene that I saw the rearview mirror, got out and got another shot out of it. This is the background, as you probably tell. What's it? Colin's Cap for sunrise.
Oh, right.
So I think it was like a 2-3 a.m. alarm to get up to Colin's Cap at the right time. And it's all part of the Bridgewater Jerry coming down the river. This massive sort of sea of clouds, and I think we're pretty lucky down here with cloud inversions in winter, and those shoulder periods. And from there, where are we at? I might skip over a few because I've got a bunch of pictures in here.
That place there right now would be in a very different condition.
Jesus Christ.
I don't know how many logs are going to be stuck in there now, but
torrent.
This afternoon at about 3 o'clock, the Meander River was already 2 meters higher than it usually is. So, as you're saying, this scene would look very different there.
It's possible that they will strip a lot of that moss off of all of that. It might look quite a bit different for a while.
That's a good point.
Yeah, who knows?
A few extra trees in a few different places too.
Yes, I would have thought so. Yeah.
So I mentioned earlier that my original focus was, fascination with astrophotography, but that is something that's kind of moved to the background a little bit. This was a year ago, and I feel like that's one of the last 3 or 4. That's when I bumped into you shooting there that night.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That would have been one of the last 3 or 4 sort of Milky Way photos that I've taken since then. And I don't, it's not like I dislike astrophotography now, but it just isn't, it just seems like it's not something I'm drawn to as much as I used to. Which is, again, it's not something that happens consciously. It's just something that sort of you at some point look at what you're shooting and realize, your focus has shifted a bit.
It's a lot really easier not shooting astro, that's for sure.
Really happy this one. Like, it's not the first one I've seen, and I know the place well, but I haven't shot at that time, and it's literally 10 minutes walk from my house, and the owner is a very, very good friend of mine for 20 years of the land that it's on, and the two things just struck me at once when I saw it, and I was like, oh my goodness. And it's opportunistic for the time of year that is as well. That's something like that for maybe a few weeks, for a month.
Yeah, I was wondering actually if it's past it now, but I'm assuming it probably is.
Yeah, I think so.
I think this was September 26th, so it might be past it now. Yeah,
probably about a month ago. It was probably peak. Yeah.
Paul, this is about 10 minutes from my house as well. You must be
really?
really close to me. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Coffee date coming up, buddy.
That's right. Yeah. Good idea. Ginger brown, right?
Ginger brown.
Yeah. What else have we got here? This was a nice moment of conditions playing out the way I was hoping they would. Got down, been to South Cape Bay, like I said earlier. I've been there a couple of times, and it's sort of my go-to when I feel like I've got, a Saturday morning till Sunday afternoon free, and I feel like the conditions are going to be right. Got down there, and then you've got the whole place to yourself, and it's just this playground. It's incredible. It's pretty overcast, but there's the tiniest gap on the horizon that could line up well. And it plays out exactly how I was hoping it would, So it was one of those nice moments where you set up, wait for the right conditions, and they actually unfold the way that you're hoping. And and you're frothing,
Yeah.
There's a degree of euphoria that's involved in going through these moments. That's I don't really know from anywhere else. Like it's a good
last
time.
time I was down there, I was being a donkey and walking in my drone batteries for Lukey.
That's right.
He was lucky enough to have a permit to fly there. I don't know anyone that ever has.
That was very
That's
fortunate.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been going there for 20 years, but my initial motivation was riding the waves. And if you see where that whitewater is for the audience on the left-hand side of the frame, that's actually a really famous wave that breaks right into the headland there. And I remember I usually go down for 3 or 4 days, usually on my own. It was really nice to go down there and meet up with Licky actually. And I mixed up surfing and photography and just spending time down there. It's really, it's a wild place. It changes. It's you can't access it by car at all. You have to bushwalk, and if you want to get a shot like that, you need to be there overnight or have a very long walk back in the dark. And it just feels different. It's the raw South Coast power. Straight south of here is Antarctica, and the ocean totally changes from what we get around Hobart. It's really magnificent.
Yeah, no, I've actually shot there, been fortunate to get there a few times myself, and it's never enough. But I have to say, like, I've seen that must be not a terribly infrequent occurrence of that kind of sunset happening, because I think almost every time I've been there, I've been fortunate to get a similar sort of sunset. I guess if you get that, even if it's overcast and cloudy, if you're by the coast and there's that little horizon gap there, something could still happen. So that's one of the big advantages.
Luke, I trust you to be able to anticipate the gap in the clouds that will show up, in 18 hours, and you'll be there to get the shot.
That's the thing. Yeah. Well, I try and apply my planning more to star stuff these days, because sunrises and sunsets still a bit of a roll of the dice in any case.
That's there's been a realization for me in the last few months where I've gotten to trying to overplan my sunrises and sunsets. And I've tried to be too specific about what I can see, what the conditions are going to be doing. And then it's leading in instances to me not heading out because I think it's not going to be what I'd like it to be. And I feel like that's a way of thinking about shooting that I need to move away from again. Because quite frankly, even if I've been out there and the conditions wouldn't have been great, I still would have had a great time, you know. And that's just this way of thinking where I'm trying to just overly focus on what's the weather going to be doing, and is it worth it or not. And the bottom line is most of the time it's going to be worth it, for one reason or another.
I think it really comes down to if you've got something specific in mind, and what how much time you have as well, and what if, I guess if you're traveling to a particular location and you only got a few days there, then you're obviously going to be trying no matter what. When you live in a certain place, it's a little harder, because do you just make a decision, I'm going to go no matter what tomorrow, or do you go, well, this other place might be a little bit better tomorrow if that place is no good? So it's very easy to get analysis paralysis.
Analysis paralysis. Oh God.
I
that's
think there's a lot of wisdom in what you're saying, is what I'm trying to say. I certainly respect that approach very much.
Well, I mean, it's a thing where I have to genuinely shift my thinking, and just move in the other direction again.
I think even people like Grant Dixon, he'll go out and get snow photos and all of that, but he's still looking at the weather to work out how it's going to pan out. So it's definitely a balancing act, with that. But it's I think if trying to get perfect conditions is probably the thing that'll really unseat you. Although I still try and do it with that astro stuff.
Well, I think with astro, if you don't plan, you have to be unbelievably lucky to be able to line up a shot. There's nothing worse than having a clear night sky or even an aurora, and being in pitch black darkness and having to find a composition.
Oh yes, I think we've had a chat once or twice when that's happened.
I think there's an example of that coming up. So next morning, this is like sunset at South Cape Bay, but really I enjoy sunrises there, more than anything. I think that's probably my favorite spot in Tasmania to set up for seascape photos, whether the conditions play out or not. The next, so for anyone who hasn't been there, these are the same rocks. This is facing east.
Yeah, east
This is
side, west
facing
side.
west. Yeah.
It's a magnificent
Um,
little trip. Yeah.
Now, this is here an example of learning to deal with the situation rather than pursuing the shot that you came out for. I sat in one of your Luke, in one of your they're not workshops, but
Planning
they're
sessions
the
or yeah.
planning sessions. Thank you. Yeah, the Sony scene planning sessions, and the mention of a moonrise over Palvarata Falls in the Hoelen Valley came up, and I thought I applied everything that you had shared in terms of making sure you can be at the right time at the right place, and thought, great, this is the opportunity to go and get a moonrise over Palvarata Falls. It's going to be coming up right around golden hour, and I show up and I realize I've taken everything into account apart from the elevation of the falls. So I was there when the moon rose over the horizon, but that was still, an hour away from me actually being able to see it over the falls. So what happened, instead of shooting the grander scene here, is I used the 100 to 400 and punched in on the falls, and it was quite nice how the sunset light was still cutting into it, and then playing with long exposures, and getting these semi-abstract images.
And that would be, it's not
Yeah.
a commonly thought of location to sort of achieve those kind of images. So it's really nice.
Yeah. What else do we have here?
By the way, you can use Google Earth for the elevation stuff, just so you know.
Oh yeah. Yep.
No,
I'm pretty sure I took a note of that exact statement while I was sitting in your planning session.
that's
Yeah.
the hardest part, and the first prize is obviously being on location and using like a augmented reality to try and work it all out. But it is.
And then hoping that the compass in your phone
the
isn't
calibration,
off,
which I don't
the
like very
calibration's
much.
right.
The other one,
Yeah,
I think that the best software I've come across is called TPE 3D, which is only on iOS, unfortunately, and I'm Android. So I actually still have an iPhone so I can run it. But that one's the best I've been able to find in terms of, because you can actually change the focal length as well and work out how your shot's going.
I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, so that particular app is I think it's the gold standard at the moment, what I've come across. So worth looking into.
Yeah, so because what Photopills did, again, the calibration was slightly off, and now on this trip we were at Tscharke, that famous ridge line in the Dolomites, and I was going to head back out for a sunrise the next morning. I saw when the sun's going to be peaking over the side of the mountain, knew the shot that I wanted to get, and was ready, thought, oh, I've still got 20 minutes, this is easy, this is all going to work out. And I'm in the wrong position, and the sun peaks, and I'm thinking, it was wrong. So I run around and I rushed around and tried to get the shot, and then made some mistakes because it was all so hectic that that morning sadly didn't really deliver the shot that I wanted to get.
So was that related to the compass not being out when you were doing the recce?
Would have been, yeah.
Oh damn.
Would have been off by a few degrees when I was using the AR to see when the sun would be in the right spot.
Yeah, I tend to verify with the 2D view as well, just to make sure that if the 2D view agrees with the augmented reality view, then that's another sort of check mechanism that you can have, I suppose, with that. And
yeah, that's very good thinking. That's your background in the science is probably playing in here.
All my background in relying on augmented reality and compasses.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah. In Android, you'll bring up the augmented reality view in Photopills or something like that, and you can actually the screen's just drifting, and it doesn't even know what it's doing, in terms of the angle. So you can clearly tell straight away that you don't want to rely on it too much. But it is handy, at least from an elevation perspective, because that won't be incorrect. It's just the angle it will be. So
I'm going to skip over a few here. You know, there's a few that are nice moments that I'm connected to that were great experience in my, you know, photography sort of journey, which is they're not fantastic shots, but it was a matter of really wanting to get out of the house. Cathedral Rock is a nice little hike, 15 minutes drive from here. I knew that it was going to be clouded out, but I wanted to head up anyway. Went up, and as I'm at the top, you know, obviously no visibility, and that as I'm at the top, the clouds drop, and I'm coming back down from the highest point, and I'm back in this beautiful forest, and it's completely, you know, it's exactly the kind of forest conditions that you want. And I just stopped for a second, and stopped moving and just listen, because you could hear the birds in the treetops, which in that kind of fog, you just know it sounds. You don't know how far away things are, you know. And as I'm standing still, there's, you know, all of a sudden there's a lyrebird that's about 5 meters in the bush next to me.
Wow.
That, you know, once I stopped still, just started making sounds again, and, you know, just echoed in that kind of forest, which, again, you know, I think without this pursuit of, without photography getting me out the door, I don't think I would have experienced something like that.
Yeah, I wouldn't have even known that there was lyrebirds up there. I guess they're marching further around the place. They're actually for those at home, they're introduced into Tassie. They're not actually naturally occurring, and can actually be quite annoying in the landscape, turning over the leaf litter, which normally actually isn't turned over like that. So making a bit of a mess.
Oh, unaware of that.
Yeah.
So that's probably not great news then. So
well,
this is
not terrible, but it's, you know, better than
They do have an impact.
Better than cane toads.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This was heading up Mount Sprent in the Southwest National Park, completely underestimating the first sort of hour and a half of the hike. I think, can't quite remember, what was it, 3 to 4 hours to get to the top?
Man.
The start is stupid. You're climbing, you're using, you know, your legs and both hands to pull yourself up.
I think I spent half my time sliding my ass coming back down it last time. It's so steep.
So I underestimated that, and I brought way too much gear with me, you know, second tripod for time lapses and so on. And my pack, I think, was around 25 kilos, and getting that up was horrific. Hated it. And so I get to the top, and the sunset's beautiful, and I get some shots, but I'm knackered and I'm really keen to go to bed. So I'm just sitting in front of my tent, and I'm having some, you know, having a dinner out of a bag, and think, you know what, I'll have a quick look. I'm facing north. I'll have a quick look over the tent, see if there's any aurora. And then this was going off.
Oh, wow.
So there goes, you know, then going to sleep. And it was a matter of having a look around what sort of compositions I could try and line up in pitch black darkness. Like we were saying earlier, you want to be able to plan for astro. It worked out, but here this is an example of so many exposures for the foreground being stacked to try and clean up the shot. Because I think I really had to crank the ISO on that. So it's probably around 8,000 ISO for the foreground. But yeah, what an experience, you know.
Last time I was up there, I slept through a storm in a crappy leaking bivy bag. It was one of the worst nights of my life. And I woke up to the most incredible sunrise. I was just like, this is just the worst
awesome.
life. But it was so wet coming down. It was basically physically impossible to keep your feet. It was just one big slide. It's so steep.
Yeah.
I haven't been back for a while.
Pardon?
Haven't been back for a while.
That was the last time then. Hey.
I love it how the body, it might be like predator is just catching the purple. The purple. Yeah, it's awesome.
Here, this is a shot from Cloudy Bay, which is, I think your background at the moment is Cloudy Bay, isn't it, Paul?
Yeah.
Looking the other way, or south. Yeah,
that's right. So
and I've stood there that many times in 24 years, and I've never taken that photograph because I've never had that focal length. And
and you've been on the wave, Paul.
And usually if it's like that, I'm out there surfing. So I'm like, that's what I mean. It was one of the shots that I was scrolling through where I had that very thought. I think because I'm so familiar with that place, I've been there so many times, and I've never photographed like this. I've never taken such a beautifully compressed view of all these different layers that, you know, I've been around for half of my life.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, I mean, it's a it's a unique ability to be able to take elements that are relatively close to you and tie them to something that is just, kilometers away from you.
That final peak is a long way away. Very long way away.
Huge, and that's, I guess, the big advantage, isn't it, of those long lenses? You can really choose, and it's a great way of kind of cropping in the camera and focusing on the details that you want to include. And how do you find in terms of, because obviously when you're shooting at 400, you get a lot of depth of field. It looks like in this one you've sort of picked out the wave because that's kind of the main thing that's going on in there. Do you try and sometimes focus stack these sort of longer shots as well?
Yeah. This would have been. I'm fairly certain this. It's been a little while since I worked on this one, but I'm fairly certain this would have been a focus stack. But it just felt like the very foreground works kind of blurred. It's just framed. It just frames it. There wouldn't be too much added to the shot, I think, if that was in focus as well. But yeah, so with the long lens, I do feel like I focus stack at times. But they're the kind of focus stacks I don't mind doing so much. It's a matter of when I've got a wide lens, point at something in the foreground, and when it's a plan to something like that. That's when I want to tear my hair out.
Yeah, and then the plant moves in the wind or something halfway through.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's when, if Sony now puts out a camera that's got in-body focus stacking, I'll have to find the money to justify that first.
Well, before the show, we were just discussing, looks like there may be an imminent release of the A7R5. Who knows? I haven't heard anything at all, but there's been definitely rumors on the rumor mill about it. And I've been wanting for years to have the in-camera focus stacking that the other brands seem to have no problem at all. So hopefully with the A7R5, that's a big enough number for them to put that in there, but you never know.
God, there's some macro shooters in Tasmania. There's Ryan Chance from up north, who does a lot of macro photography with Sony, and he ends up with 40 exposures that he focus stacks together, which it's just fascinating,
and if you can get it so that if there's no movement in the scene apart from the focus distance changing, then it's actually relatively straightforward in software to put it together. If everything's taken at the right spaces. I know there's another guy, Tim Grimsey, who does a lot of funky stuff. I believe he actually uses a macro rail, and in some cases macro rails are better because you don't actually have breathing from the lens. You're only changing the distance, but the lens isn't breathing, so it might actually make it easier to do some stacking as well. But when you're doing landscape photography, the macro rail is not going to really work with a wide angle and that kind of thing. So yes, there's a whole nother dimension of photography doing all that sort of thing.
Here's
something you thought about, Ollie, in terms of doing
macro.
I've
spoken to Tim, who you just mentioned, Tim Grimsey. I've spoken to him a fair few times, and he keeps saying, there's a whole other area that you can go and shoot when all the conditions are crap. When it's outside of Milky Way, when it's when the weather's terrible and you don't really need any sort of half decent light. You can just crawl around in the mud around Wellington, and get your shots. And it's really tempting to get a macro lens, but I feel like it's going to be another thing that sort of puts me like I'm just going to try and ride too many trains at the same time, rather than like there's every chance I'll get a lot out of it, but
it's pretty time consuming. I saw Wolfgang Lowick's work about 13 years ago, and I literally walked down the road and bought a macro lens after that. And to be honest, I hardly ever pull it out of my bag because it's the type of photography that takes a lot of patience, a lot of slowing down, and that's not really my style.
And I think I totally agree with you in terms of stick with have a core sort of process or core thing and stick with that rather than when he was saying if the conditions aren't great, then you can do macro. It's like, oh, for me, it would be like, oh, I can have a rest, you know. If I had macro, then on top of that, then I'd just be shooting more macro, or you know, then you're just always taking photos. So I guess it's it's an approach that's good to, sometimes it's good to limit yourself to certain things so that it's a bit clearer in your mind what you're there for.
Yeah, you know, on the one hand, you know, for sure, it's not, I think the reason why I'm at the moment not wanting to get into it is because I feel like, right, I want to further my skills in the sort of landscapes that I shoot at the moment. I just had to look up his name. I feel terrible I forgot him, but there's Dietmar, who's who I'm sure you guys know, right?
Yes,
And
yes.
he's like, in terms of these big, epic, grand Tassie landscapes, like I think he was probably you know, like somebody who captured so much of that, and then moved away from landscape, and he's a birder now. So
He's done a
you
great job.
never know, like, you know,
Sure.
just very good at everything he does with the camera, I think, you know. But that's just what I'm thinking is, you know, it's nice to know that there's all these areas of photography that, you know, you could explore whenever you felt like it. But at the moment, I'm just focusing my energy elsewhere,
And I
which
guess you're
is, you
also,
know,
sorry, you're
no, please
indicating
go on.
initially that you started off doing drones, and you know, I guess for I don't know if you've shown a drone photo yet. I'm sure you do still take them, but maybe drones itself is another aspect where you've decided more so that ground-based stills might be a better focus in terms of that.
Yeah, it's surprising that I just don't end up flying the drone as much as I thought I would, you know. It's I like working with my files out of the full frame camera way more than working with the DJI files. Um I use the drone when, you know, there's a composition I couldn't get to otherwise. Again, if you're in a great spot, the light's good, but there's nothing around you. I said earlier, you can take the super till out and get something, but the drone also, you know, opens up a whole bunch of abilities there. But yeah, I've noticed that as well. If I go through my pictures now, there's very few drone pictures. There's one later that I took in the Dolomites, but I think that's the only one I'd be showing here. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
interesting, isn't it? But it's not also a massive surprise given how much of Tasmania you actually can fly one, you know,
That's
legitimately
exactly
as
right.
well.
Yeah,
So there is
Yeah,
that
that's
as an
right.
aspect as well.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah,
this
this is
one's
just
amazing,
you
mate.
know, yeah, this is Mountfield West. That little yellow splotch, my tent up there. And that was don't know, that was one of the last overnight hikes I did. Oh Jesus, that was March. That's disappointing. Um, uh, yeah, and that was a great moment where I ended up getting a little bit of aurora. Got the Milky Way, and this is then the moon
Yeah.
rising. So the aurora was far stronger, and then as this came up and actually illuminated the rocks on my side here. Yeah, the aurora faded obviously a fair bit, but it was a nice moment. You know, it's a great scene to be out there for that. And again, there's not a soul around, you know. And then the next morning, I just stood up on the peak here, with the telelens, and it was just cloud inversions everywhere, and got shots in all directions.
Oh my.
Yeah, it's a playground. Yeah.
It's a very beautiful walk, that one. I was
Mm.
fortunate to do that earlier this year too, and that was definitely one of the highlights of the year for me as well. Yeah,
That
well done.
that whole plateau up there is
Yeah,
incredible, isn't it?
yeah. Oh, it is.
It's just tons of cushion plants.
It's really
Yeah.
not a. I mean, the boulder field you have to navigate to get there's a bit interesting,
Yeah.
but once you get through that, and some really cool little huts there, I'm sure you would have enjoyed
Hmm.
photographing as well. So, yeah.
Mm. But yeah, you're right. I wasn't thinking about the boulder field. So because I think you come from somewhere over here, go down
Okay.
this
Yeah.
gap, and then come above that. And I think the majority of all of this of that side of Mount Field is just boulder fields. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the next night I got this shot down at Tarn Shell.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Um, yeah. Uh, and this was an example of yeah, I think I was knackered at the end of that day, and I set my alarm for a blue hour exposure for the foreground. And I slept through that, and then it came down to focus stacking in the middle of the night. Which I'm sure you prefer because it's more, you know, it's less of a composite then. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's
Yeah.
fine.
Mm. Um Yeah, and from there I did a trip to Cradle for the Vegas with my good friend Maurizio, who is a
Oh, yeah.
local photographer as well.
Does more
Very
wedding
talented
stuff,
photographer.
doesn't he, Maurizio?
Does now,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, he loves doing landscapes,
Yeah.
but has realized that there's a lot of money to be earned in the wedding photography industry.
Yeah.
And they're very good at it too. Yeah. So
Oh,
that was
yeah.
an outing there for the Vegas. Got these really mean conditions the entire time, pouring with rain, but really it was it was incredible. Like we got
Oh,
scenes like
yeah.
these,
Wow.
and this is just a handheld shot while like the wind and the rain are whipping around us, and we're just trying to get to Scott Kilvert Hut, just behind Cradle. But yeah, great scenes and great scenes and really unforgiving conditions, and then sitting at Barn Bluff and waiting for that to come out of the clouds, and it did that for the briefest moment, just as the sun was hitting it.
Yeah.
Yeah, another one from that trip.
Oh, wow.
Beautiful.
So Scott Kilvert Hut would be just 15 minutes to the left here.
Mm.
It's a very unusual. I'd never been there before, and it's a great way of seeing Cradle, I think, because I mean, this is Little Horn here, right?
Yeah, it's the other side of it. So most people would never recognize that as Cradle Mountain. Yeah.
Yeah, and so during these massive downfalls, it was just, oh, this is going to take forever because it's a big pano again. Lots of little waterfalls running down the side of the mountains, and it's just this grey rock and arteries of orange running through it. And, yeah, it was beautiful experience. Here, I'm sure you guys are aware of where this is.
Yeah, did you? I think you just posted this one recently, or a story.
Yeah, I think just a few days ago, I think.
Yeah.
This was Daniel Clark, who I mentioned much earlier.
Oh, yes.
Him and his partner showed me where this spot was on one of their last mornings before they moved away for a couple of months. Because I've been trying to find it, but I always ended up. Turns out I was about 2 minutes away from being here, and I always called it off.
It's not the sort of place you want to get wrong, though, is it? Because it's this.
No,
those
that's
cliffs
right.
are pretty reasonable.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Oh, did you see in winter there was somebody took I forgot his name. It's a Tasmanian photographer. He's quite young, I think, and he shoots film. And he takes film up mountains.
Rory, is it?
I'm sure might be. And he got a snowy shot at this spot on his film camera.
Yeah.
I was just thinking that's some fair bit of stone standing there in snow.
Oh, yeah, there's some people that really push the boundaries around, that's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, from here, you this is just a nice example of how this spot that everybody would have seen at some point played. This was over the time span of I think 48 hours, and just completely different conditions for somewhat the same composition, and working it out slightly differently as well.
Yeah, that's a brilliant seascape spot, isn't it? Just in terms of variety and what the tides can do and that kind of thing. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, I'd love to be out there if there's a bit more swell going, because this was next to nothing, and I feel like that scene with some actual waves in it would be a joy.
You got to wait for a really big wind blown. It doesn't get a lot of natural ocean swell, so you'll only get swell after a really big blow. So you kind of got to hang around on the back of a storm to get a lot of action there.
A big northerly coming in.
Yeah. And this is facing, what would it be, southeast? And then if you turn 90 degrees, you'd be looking at that.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It's pretty much the same spot. I feel like it just, it's reminding me of it's a shipwreck almost,
Yeah.
David Murphy's playground, this spot.
Yeah.
Right.
Definitely. Yeah, it's like basalt rock out there, which is quite different to the rock that you get in Tasmania generally, which is dolerite. So yeah, definitely really interesting spot to look for different compositions for sure.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to find up along that entire coast, and then also going down the west coast that way to you know, past. I think we were just chatting about that. You know, Sarah Ann Rocks. I've just gone
Yes.
through there once, and was there for one sunset. I was just thinking, there's so much to photograph around there, and so many seascapes to get to. And I'm super keen this summer when I'm getting opportunities to head out much to shoot seascapes, because um, it's so much fun to get one scene and then many different ways of how it actually comes together.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, it takes us to, you know, getting into waterfalls a fair bit and getting my child with that. So I think we all know that one, super easy to get to, on the East Coast. It's at Matina Falls. This is a little scene in the Western Tiers when I was going towards Bastion Cascades, and I just came across that.
Yeah, I think your waterfall photography for me is probably some of the work that I enjoy of yours the best.
Oh, is that right?
You've got the one that you took at in the snow on the, I think it was Myrtle Gully or somewhere like
Yep.
that, and that's always stood out to me quite brilliantly as well. But yeah, I do appreciate your waterfall work.
Oh, that's very nice to hear. That Myrtle Gully one made me think, God, I want to get more waterfall shots in the snow. And then I kept trying to line up a big dumping of snow to go up to Mount Field and just get, like, you know, even if it's just like the classic waterfalls around there. But yeah, just, you know, each time didn't quite work out with the mornings
Yeah,
that we had
it's rare that it gets quite that low. I'm sure it has happened, but it wouldn't last for very long. You have to get in there pretty quick.
Yeah, I've called the visitor center at Mount Field a couple of times asking, did that snow reach Horseshoe Falls? And they said, I don't know. You have to come and look. Yeah.
Most helpful.
It's fair enough, you know.
Yeah.
Like, seriously, should just get myself into gear.
Yeah.
And then out here in the Western Tiers, just ferns and greens, and I liked how this almost stands out. Like it's like a crown with ferns hanging off it and these beautiful mosses. And that's just one of those spots where you can walk up and down this river and find so much to shoot. Yeah, Western Tiers, good time. I was actually chatting to Daniel Clark about trying to find a way from here over to Chasm Falls,
All right.
which could be full of amazing scenes, but
Yeah.
we'll have to look into the topography there and see if that
I
works.
think
But
it's pretty I think it'd be a good adventure, put it that way.
Yeah,
But there's a lot of
word I'd come up with too, like hardcore adventure.
Yeah, might be a bit of abseiling and climbing sort of style things
right,
going on. But who knows? I mean,
who knows? I mean,
yeah. But the thing is that I'm aware. I don't know. I'm not aware of where they are, but I know that there's quite a lot of great sort of waterfalls shots taken in there that aren't really on the beaten path, so to speak. So it's definitely a lot of little gems there to be looked at around the place, I would have thought, and there's probably a lot more of them right now too.
Yeah.
So I was thinking it would be really interesting to get into the Western Tiers after all of this, but it mightn't be the smartest idea either. So
I went to Adamson's Falls down in the Hoelen.
Yeah.
I've never actually managed to get those falls at the right flow. And the first time I went was after we've had, I think, 5 days of nonstop downpour here. And I was thinking, now I think today, by now, it's going to be all right. And I get out of the car, and the entire hike was in sort of, you know, ankle to knee deep water, which was an incredible sight to see, that sort of forest essentially submerged, and realizing it you know, it's designed to be able to do that. You know, this is fine here. You know, and then got to the falls, and it was just this insane raging torrent where, you know, you couldn't get anywhere close to it. But I hadn't seen anything like it in Tassie so far, so I didn't get any shots, but it was still, you know, stuck with me as a great memory.
Yeah.
Something I'd love to shoot more and really get my teeth into is shoot old growth scenes, or just generally forest scenes. Very challenging, I think we're all aware of, but yeah, there's just got to be plenty of places around where you can go and practice that.
There's so many, and it's there's still pockets of really high quality stuff, I think, to sort of track down, but yeah, making sense of the chaos is always the challenge with those sort of scenes, isn't it?
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And it is a particular type of chaos that, you know, Tasmania, or I think, you know, in general, the type of Australian bush that you get here. So I was just seeing that, being in Germany for a few weeks and going for a walk around in the forest there, and you've got all these neat trees, sort of, you know, but you just take a little step to the left and they're all, you know, none of them are crossing over. It's just all of a sudden it's a neat scene. And here I think it's a complex 3D puzzle of, you know, trying to kind of make it work. This was a shot that I've been had been eyeing off for years, and it was really nice to catch that recently. And I'm sure you'd know where it is. But getting to that shot in itself, to that angle, was a little bit of an adventure in itself again. And it was really nice to bag that.
Did it involve having a swim, did it?
Pretty much. Yeah, pretty much, yeah. And getting down that cliff as well, and then getting across the water. But yeah, and it's just stupid. And then you're standing there on a Sunday morning, in, you know, sort of hip deep water, taking pictures, thinking this is great, but the cold is starting to creep in now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's the hard part.
Another quick one. This is just our local. I think something. We had a fair bit of rain, so just popped down. Again, this is 15 minutes from where I live. Cape Pillar, which I think is my which is probably being at Cape Pillar for sunrises. So obviously we're looking at Cape Hoy here. The shot from Cape Pillar is being there for sunrise is such a great experience, you know. I don't know if, you know, I did the 3 Capes many years ago, before, you know, I think before we even lived here. I know we had just moved here. And you can stay at a hut that's relatively close to it. And I just recommend anyone doing the 3 Capes to you know, duck out here, you know, leave the hut, what about an hour before sunrise, hour and a half max, and just do the quick dash out.
I haven't done it for a long time. I guided on this whole peninsula for 17 years, and the days where I was there's no yellow brick road like there is now. I used to take a rope, and some of the groups that I came with, people would literally get stuck up waist deep in mud on these big plains you had to cross to get out to Cape Pillar. So it was a total experience.
Jesus.
I remember dragging people out of these mud pits and ropes, like on multiple trips, and struggling to find water, and these little sketchy little tiny campsites we're trying to sort of squeeze everyone into. And
God.
But I haven't
it's very different now.
I haven't been there since it's become a super highway, and you know, like a really high-end sort of product, as it were. I think, you know, all that aspect of it is still there, and it's the biggest sea cliffs in the Southern Hemisphere, is my understanding. And there's nothing quite like it when you get out on the Blade or something like that on the end of Cape Pillar, and it just drops away on both sides of you. It's oh man, there's almost nothing like it in Australia. It's incredible.
There's a big, I think Luke and I have had this conversation, there's a big bucket list shot of mine, is I'd love to get an aurora shot out there. And I do feel like I really need to keep an eye on the conditions for that, because I don't want to be standing on that Blade in the middle of the night with the wind blowing in the wrong direction. I go on, sorry.
It's one of those ones that it's also not just the wind and conditions, but it is you know, it's a reasonable walk going in there, so it's a decent. I guess also you need to have enough time to get in there to start with, so you'd have to make a decision quite early in the day if you're going to do that as well. So yeah, it's been on the list for me too. So who gets there first, who knows, but but it's definitely, it would be an incredible shot. But yes.
Yeah, Paul, I can't imagine that place the way that you're describing it, just because it's almost, you know, in terms of outdoor experiences, it's a bit more like a manicured park sort of that you walk
Yeah,
through.
so I've heard.
Like the cliffs are amazing. The views are incredible, but it's you know, in terms of overnight hiking, it's not sort of the kind of standard Tassie adventure that you can get elsewhere, I think.
Yeah. I call it the yellow brick road.
Yeah, right.
The dry boot
Let's go for
road.
it. A tickle down the yellow brick road. I mean, it is what is really fantastic about it, to be fair, is it's a year-round walk. And there's not many places that are really consistent in that regard. It can get pretty interesting in the winds. There's areas called Hurricane Heath and Tornado Flats, and I have literally been crawling along there and dealing with people that have fallen over and broken bones. It's pretty gnarly when the wind gets right. We've got to be a bit careful. But yeah, as a sunrise location, unbelievable.
And just in terms of this image itself, it's obviously a very, very deliberate choice to put the foreground bush to sort of create some layering there, and I guess also fill in that negative space that would have been there otherwise. And that's something that I've noticed in your photos that you do from time to time as well. Maybe interested in your thought process there. I really love it. And it's another element to help tell a story and sort of place you where, you know, that you took the shot.
Well, I find a challenging thing that I had to get my head wrapped around with a telelens was that although you get amazing compression, you really have to have a lot of elements in a somewhat right place to be able to convey depth to get something as close to you as possible. So I've been out there before and I got the same shot during blue hour, and it was, you know, it's a perfectly okay shot, but it doesn't have anything in the foreground. So it really just, you know, it's just water, Cape Hoy, and then the background. And you just realize there's clearly something missing there. So I feel like, yeah, I don't work with blurry foregrounds too much. Like, I don't like to work with them too much, but I feel like when it comes to this is really the only, I think the only reasonable option here, because having that foreground, you know, I wouldn't focus stack that. I think I think that the color delivers the purpose of, you know, balancing out that composition the way that I'd like it to. But yeah, so
you do it well, Ollie. I've noticed it in not a lot of your work, but consistently enough that it's not a regular choice for landscape photographers to use a blurred foreground. But the way you do it is very graceful, and it's very supportive, often purely aesthetically. And as I've seen your work evolve, that the great style component of your work comes through in the aesthetics that you choose, with the subtlety of the tonal ranges and the way they blend and fluidly kind of move into each other, when, you know, and it takes quite an eye and a very deliberate understanding of how to do that to create that. And I feel like that's one of your great strengths in your personal style, Ollie.
Oh, cheers. Yeah, that's very nice to hear. Thank you. So this is also the last Tassie shot. I think this was the last sort of hike I did before doing that 5-week stint over in Europe. So I've just included a couple more 5-6 shots from the Dolomites, just because it's fun to see how that place comes together with scenes like this. I mean, I've not touched this much at all. You know, there's the slightest bit of contrast worked into it, but what a scene, right? Like, I just couldn't believe that we're standing at the top of Tscharke, this ridgeline that I was mentioning earlier, and that was actually one of the few evenings where we got really nice light. And I just couldn't believe the scale of this place. I found it really hard to convey scale on that. So you can see here you've got your, the refugios, the huts that you can stay in, but again, they're a fair bit away still from what we're seeing in the background here. So and then you turn a little to the right and you're looking at something like this, and you turn a bit further and you get this sort of scene. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. Oh, not jealous at all.
Oh no, I was lucky that
oh my lord,
Jen was obviously with me up here for that sunset, and she's loving it as much as I was. And after this trip, saying we need to come back to the Dolomites. I was like, yeah, we do.
Is that a glacier
Um,
in there too? Is it, or is it?
I'm not.
It's like a scree rockfall, I think.
Oh,
maybe.
okay,
I
right.
would say that's that's
Yeah.
what it would be. Yeah. Here, there's a drone picture, but
Whoa,
it's
look at that.
it's getting
Wow.
this sort of serpentining, windy road is a great opportunity. But that's
That's got
just I
a
just there's
huge three-dimensional feel to it to me.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's the only drone picture I've included in this entire
Try that in the Sienna Drone Awards, Ollie.
Sienna Drone Awards.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
right.
I won the abstract category a few years ago. It's fun. It's called the Drone Awards, but it's actually all types of aerial. In fact, I don't even know why they call it Drone Awards, but it's the biggest singular aerial contest in the world, and you'll see a lot of incredible European drone work like this in there, and that's up there with it, man. I reckon.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Cool. Sienna Drone Awards. Yeah, I'll look into it.
Have a crack, mate. You can buy me a coffee if you want it.
Will do. Yeah, and then just a couple more, layered of these just unbelievable ridge lines. At this sort of thing. I mean, you get people. It's going to take a second to catch up. You get people into the shot to convey scale, and then they're just 3 pixels in the actual photo. Because the scene is just so grand. Oh, yeah.
This is what working with 64 megapixel camera files is like.
Yeah.
Well, it depends on if
my
you render previews and things as well. If you do one-to-one previews, then you can view them straight away, but then it takes forever to render them initially. So,
admittedly, this is again, I think this is a 6 or 7 shot wide scene.
oh
I was
yeah,
just going to ask you that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you stitch in
Imagine how
Lightroom
big
when
it
you do
is
them,
that.
like just merge to panorama, or do you tend to do them more manually?
No, I don't do them manually. I give it a go in Lightroom. If I like the result, I'll go with it. And otherwise I'll merge them in Photoshop and see what the results there. But I've not merged. This is not going to catch up. This is just not going to happen. Yeah. But no, I've never stitched a panorama manually because I've never had to really, which is fortunate spot to be in, I think.
It's great that Lightroom's included that as part of their package. I really hope that they do focus stacking one day too. It'd make life very easy.
Oh, wouldn't it just? Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Yeah, the focus stacking in Photoshop is sadly not not what I'd like it to be. No. Yeah, it's just the kind of mountains that we don't really get in Tasmania.
Well, there's maybe not.
I mean, it's
like
a very it's not the scale. Like, I feel like the big difference here is that you can essentially. I took this picture an hour's walk from the car park, which means you've got lots of people around, which means it's all quite developed. There's families going for a walk in the area, and that's great on the one hand, but that's a possibility. But on the other hand, I do like the fact that if you put in here in Australia, I think it'd be the same there. Wherever you actually have to put in a hard effort for just a couple of hours, you'll probably get the place to yourself. And there's so much of that down here.
What sort of altitudes are you talking with those elevations?
I think 2,000 to 2,500 meters.
Okay.
Yeah. So nothing nothing
Not
stupid.
outrageous.
No. Yeah, and then the last one is picture that's been seen plenty of times. But what I wasn't prepared for here is, as a matter of fact, that scene that we were just looking at, this one here, is just here.
Oh, right. There you go.
Yeah. So I'd seen this composition lots of times, and I never managed to understand the scale of it until I was looking at it there. And you can just see here that a couple of people in there. I mean, I don't know if you've been at this spot. It's just so grand. I was taking these pictures and I was looking through my camera, and then every time I looked up from the camera, it was a bit of a Jesus Christ. Like, yeah. yeah, so that's it's the majority of the photos that I was going to
Mm.
show
Yeah.
you guys.
No, that's
Yeah,
fantastic, mate. It's been great to go through a selection of your portfolio, and I can encourage everyone to. I'm assuming probably the best spot for them to check them out is on your Instagram profile as well, Ollie.
yeah. On Instagram is where I've put, there's a whole bunch of new things that photos that I'm putting up on Instagram. The website is, I think, 6 months old around there. So that's actually where I've got, at the time then my portfolio sitting. But yeah, so I think the Instagram at the moment would be the one to see anything that I'm putting up next, and sort of my best shots of recent months.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
And do you have
Yeah, I really enjoy your flow and the consistency of what you produce and how often you share it with us. Ollie, it's
Mm.
yeah, and seeing things that I know and I appreciate and I've seen many years just interpreted so beautifully is a real joy for me, mate. So thank
Mm.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's great to hear. I recall, I think we had this conversation probably on Instagram a little while ago, and you were saying it's quite nice to see these places that and that you thought, you just didn't forget about them, but it's not something that you know it so well that you wouldn't venture out for it. And then it's like, oh yeah, it's all still there, and it's all still really nice. It's still beautiful.
yeah, that and you make me feel a bit lazy. Like, oh, it might be an inversion this morning if I want to get up at 3 o'clock and walk 4 hours up the freaking mountain for sunrise because they've shut the gate. But and then Ollie's done it.
Yeah. No, it's everyone's got their own things, and it's nice to have sleep-ins too sometimes. So, but yeah, I think how do you go about working out if I'll put it in my sort of frame of reference, I suppose, like if you're actively shooting, or if you're in a period where you want to have a rest. I guess for me, I need to say, all right, I'm for the next period of time, I'm actually going to go out and shoot when I feel the conditions are there for it. Or are you very much like, I've got these days, and that's I'm going to put something in that time? Do you have a particular approach that you use there?
I think it comes down to I've got the time and I'm going to find somewhere else. I'm going to find something to go and shoot.
Mm.
And that doesn't always work out. There was a trip I did out towards the Tscharke, I think, in May, and the weather was just just not very nice. And wherever I went, I didn't get much out of it. And I felt like at the end of the day, I was sitting in the car far more. Like I just felt like I'd driven around Tasmania without actually getting much out of it in terms of photography. But still, I wandered around trying to find the bottom of Philosopher Falls for a bit. That's
Oh yeah, good luck with that.
I didn't I didn't find it.
That's a sucker for punishment, that one.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But it's I still I think on average it's not necessarily a matter of saying this is when the conditions are right to go and achieve that, but it's really I've got that time and I need to use it to go and shoot. I think I'm much more in a place where I have to tell myself, don't go shooting because your editing backlog is keeping you up at night. It's going to crush you one day. And just sit down and actually knock out a bunch of edits. But that's just not the fun part for me of this whole activity. Yeah. Yeah, so I honestly, I think that's it. I've got the time. I'll go and find something to do with it.
And
And the nice thing is, usually about Tassie is, if it's horrible on the East Coast, it's all right on the West, or vice versa. And North and South are going to be different. And there's always somewhere to go.
If it's overcast, then maybe do some waterfalls, and if it's sunny, then you might want to go into the mountains, or you can.
That's right.
Be very adaptable based on the conditions that presents itself. So you're right. There's very very hard to find a time where there's nowhere that would work, I suppose. And I guess
that's right.
A small enough place that if you're based in a particular spot, you can pretty much go anywhere. If you've got a few days, you can go anywhere on the island, really. So that's always handy.
That's right. That's right. So we've managed to. That was part of our move to Tasmania, is that we've managed to arrange a 4-day week. and that means we've got alternating 4-day weekends. And a 4-day weekend in Tassie really means that you can go to any corner, you know.
Mm.
I mean, you can't necessarily hike to any corner, but it's a lot of time to go and do something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's why I feel like we've had I mean, I've been away for a few weeks, but in the lead up to that, we've had a bit of bad luck, I think, with the conditions not really playing out too well on those weekends. But, you know, let's see what the coming months bring. Pretty keen to get out. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's only going to be getting warmer from here, and you know, some wildflowers popping out, and you know, longer days, meaning, you know, you can do longer walks and all of those sort of things. So it's going to be pretty exciting for the hiking season, or the, you know, getting back out into the mountains and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's always nice to follow that, and follow your work too, and see where you end up going. Do you have any more trips planned or anything like that, or is it just a matter of getting through the backlog first and then looking into that later?
No, let's face it, I'm just going to go and be shooting more. Like, that's definitely going to happen. I mean, it's now, what's it, mid-October. There's Scoparia coming up in about 4 to 6 weeks, probably.
Yeah, normally
Sound
early
about
December,
right?
Generally.
Right. Okay. So there's the idea for Walls of Jerusalem for that. That's actually something that Jen would be keen to head up to as well. Hasn't been up there before.
Yeah, and Daniel, who you mentioned, did a great job of that last year.
Got a nice shot of it.
Yeah.
And yes, I've been to the Walls in December 2020, but there was no Scoparia around just then, I believe. And then again this year in the middle of winter with Lockie Bevers, who's a photographer down here as well. We're expecting some snow, but not quite as much as we got. That was a very interesting experience. It was great, but I learned that hiking in knee-deep snow is significantly harder than than not hiking in knee-deep snow. Yeah, I think otherwise I've got a whole list of potential hikes, and it's just a matter of seeing where do the conditions work out, and when can I go and do that.
Line it all up,
You know, Daniel being back in December, we were talking about Arm River Track for a couple of nights and just seeing what we get around there. Yeah, you know,
see how it all pans out.
That's right.
It's a good place. That was one of my work walks for 17 years. Arm River Track. There's definitely a lot of little pockets around there, and not too many people go off the track around there. Not I should encourage that, but it's and if you want to leap in and go all the way through out to Pillion, you can. You know, if you want to gun it all the way through, and there's some beautiful little segues over to East Paddocks and stuff around there as well. They used to do a lot. And then you can easily fluidly sort of move across to the Walls if you want to. It's a pretty magnificent area, really. It's probably about 2 minutes underwater right now.
Jesus, probably. Yeah.
All right. Well, well, thanks so much. Thanks so much for joining us, and
thanks for having me on.
It's been a real pleasure to see your journey and learn a bit more about your approach and things like that. So it's oliverwhone.com is your website there.
Oliverwhone.com.
And then also you have the Instagram and all of that as well. So
that's right.
We'll have all of those links in the show description and all of that. Thanks
guys. I'll chip in. So, Ollie, I really appreciated the time and thoughtfulness you put in, and in some ways the vulnerability of offering that whole journey, and very courageously showing how you've learned and evolved. Like, you know, that's a kind of slightly put the ego aside and an offering for other people that I actually appreciate. That's not an easy thing to do sometimes for some people, to acknowledge that, you know, hey, wasn't it, you know. And what I think is really inspiring about it is the speed of the evolution of your work, and, you know, 4, 5, 6 years at the most is quite astonishing, and it really makes me wonder, geez, what's Ollie going to be doing in a few years' time? But we're going to be, you know, and it's really exciting to see. And again, I'll reiterate just how much I appreciate how much I've appreciated even more where I live, and even locally, thanks to you, because I regularly see something. I just drove past that the other day. Oh my God, I never even thought to photograph that. Oh, Ollie's got it. And and the aesthetic beauty that you bring and the quality of your work is really shines through so beautifully, and just about everything you photograph on a very, very wide range of material and focal lengths and vision. And I think that's it's really inspiring, Ollie. So,
so hugely appreciated.
And you can buy me a coffee with a compliment. Catch up down the road.
No, sounds good. No, I really appreciate that, guys. And like, obviously, I hugely look forward to seeing what you guys come up with, because that's always a massive joy. Yeah.
And
we'll see.
Finally put something
lucky,
up.
If we get lucky, we'll get some more of this on my workshop again. If anyone wants to come join on a bit, it's better be last minute. We'll only be a week away by the time this comes out. But if you're in Tassie anyway, or you want to pop down and come join me, it would have been Luke and I, but you're just going to be stuck with me this time. 27th to 30th of October. It's going to be a beauty. Yeah. And Luke you'll be out in the Tscharke at the same time, I think, Luke. With
I've got a trip to Perth. I'm flying over to Perth on Sunday, and going to do some shooting on the Cape to Cape walk over there, and then come back for a few days, and then off into the Tscharke and doing some shooting, or we're leading a workshop there, and obviously take some photos along the way as well, if it's not washed away, that is. But I'm very much looking forward to spending some time in that part of the world. There's just so much to see and do out there, and it should be great. So amazing.
Well, keep doing what you're doing, Ollie, because we're freaking loving it, mate, and it's an absolute joy.
Absolutely.
Cheers, guys. Yeah. Oh, this has been great. Thank you very much for having me on.
No worries.
See you Gingerbound real soon, mate.
Sounds good.
Hey guys, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again next week, or next fortnight, for our next show. Catch you later.
Night, everyone.
Good night.
Bye.